All right, buckle up because today's deep dive, well, it gets kind of intense.
Yeah, intense might be an understatement.
We're talking Sodom and Gomorrah, guys.
You know, that whole fire and brimstone thing still gets people talking, even after all these years.
No kidding. I mean, even if you've never even cracked open a Bible, you've heard that phrase thrown around, right? Sodom and Gomorrah, instant shorthand for like total chaos and destruction.
For sure, and it makes you wonder, what could possibly be so bad that it's still got this kind of hold on us, thousands of years later?
So, like, where do we even start unpacking this whole thing?
Well, we got to go back to the source, right? Genesis chapter 19. The scene is set with, Abraham's nephew. He's hanging out by the city gates of Sodom.
Okay.
When these two, well, let's just say angelic figures appear.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're dealing with some supernatural vibes.
Oh, yeah, but here's the thing about those times. Hospitality, especially towards strangers, that was huge like non-negotiable.
So Lot's not just being like weirdly eager by inviting them home for dinner.
Not at all. In those days, refusing hospitality, that was a serious insult, could even be dangerous.
Wow. High stakes.
Absolutely. So Lot's actually following protocol here, offering food, shelter, even washing their feet. That's just how it was done.
Gotcha. So it's like a totally different world, right? And this is where things take a turn, like a really hard turn. The men of Sodom, they get wind of these visitors and, well...
Let's just say their intentions are less than pure.
Huge understatement.
Yeah.
Surrounding the house, it's just awful.
And it's not even just about what they're trying to do, which is horrific in itself, but the language they use. It's all about power and humiliation and, honestly, the way they talk to the angels. Total disregard for anything sacred.
Right, like they get zero fear of, like, divine retribution or anything.
Exactly. And that's what makes the next part even more disturbing. Lot, in a moment of sheer desperation, he offers up his daughters instead.
I mean, talk about a gut punch moment. It's hard to even wrap your head around
That's horrific, no doubt. But here's the thing. We can't judge this through a modern lens. We have to understand the mindset back then, as awful as it is. Women, tragically, were seen as possessions, bargaining chips.
The Lot's actions, as awful as they are, it's a reflection of how twisted things were, right?
Exactly. He's trapped in this brutal system, facing a mob and making a choice born out of absolute terror. It's a glimpse into the abyss of that culture, and it sets the stage for everything that's about to go down.
So you can practically feel things escalating, like something's got to give.
And boy, does it ever. This is where the angels, they really flex their divine authority.
Yeah, it's a total don't mess with us moment.
No kidding. They basically throw up this protective shield around Lot and his family, and bam, the mob's struck blind.
Talk about a message from above, right? Like we want to bring that energy. Okay, here's some divine intervention for you.
Right. It's such a powerful image. Those who came to harm, they're blinded by their own wickedness, you could say.
It's like this whole theme we see throughout Genesis, this idea that straying too far from righteousness, it has consequences.
Big time. We saw it with the flood, and now here it is again with Sodom and Gomorrah. It's like this pattern, humanity pushing the limits and those limits pushing back.
So, okay, even with total annihilation staring him in the face, Lot still tries to bargain. He's like, hey, mighty angels, how about instead of, the hills, we just pop over to that little town, Zoar. It's on the way. Super close.
It's amazing, right? Talk about human nature. Even with fire and brimstone raining down, we still want to negotiate, try to control things just a little bit.
Totally. That instinct to survive, it's strong, but this is Genesis we're talking about. And, well, angels aren't exactly known for being, like, super flexible negotiators.
Nope, not really their thing. So what happens next? Well, let's just say it's the ultimate told you so moment.
Cue the epic soundtrack, right? Reading Brimstone and Fire. I can see the album cover now.
And it's not just a light sprinkle either, right? We're talking total obliteration. The cities, the people, everything gone, wiped off the map.
Just like that.
It's this stark reminder of the power that's attributed to the divine, this idea that messing with certain forces has some serious consequences.
And it's interesting, too, because while all of this is going down, remember Lot's uncle, Abraham, he's actually watching the smoke from a distance.
Oh, that's right. It's like this subtle connection back to everything that came before.
Exactly. Tying Lot's story back to Abraham's covenant with God, that promise of a great nation. It adds this whole other layer, you know?
It's like, on the one hand, you have God's judgment, but on the other hand, there's also this reminder of his promise. It really adds depth to the whole narrative.
And you know what always gets me about this whole story? That moment with Lot's wife. Looking back, pillar of salt. Talk about an image that sticks with you.
Right. I mean, it's brutal. But it really gets at something so human, that pull of the past, even when you know you should let go. It's like this warning etched in, well, salt.
It's kind of poetic in a really dark way.
Totally. And the interpretations of the salt imagery itself, people have been debating that for centuries. Some see it as straight up punishment, like don't question.
Makes sense.
But others, they see it as preservation, almost like a monument to grief, Like her tears, they just crystallize.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that.
There's a lot packed into that one image, that's for sure.
No kidding. So where do Lot and his daughters end up after all this?
Hiding in a cave?
A cave.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They've lost everything. Home, community, that whole life gone.
Talk about starting over from scratch, huh? But I guess this is where things get really tough to talk about.
Yeah, this is where the story takes another really, really dark turn with Lot and his daughters.
Right, the incest.
Yeah.
And it's just awful. There's no other way to say it. We have to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. No condoning it whatsoever. But like everything else in this story, context is important, even if it doesn't excuse what happens. These women, they're utterly isolated, terrified, and on top of that, they're living in a world where having heirs, that's everything.
So they make a horrifying choice, driven by desperation and trauma.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even the worst actions, they don't happen in a vacuum. And the consequences of this choice, well, they're huge.
Because those sons, they become the ancestors of the Moabites and the Ammonites, right?
Who, if you remember, become major rivals to the Israelites later on. It's like this cycle of trauma and violence playing out across generations.
It's almost like that saying, hurt people, but on a massive scale.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that these ancient stories, as crazy as they might seem, they weren't just abstract ideas. They were grappling with real issues, power dynamics, the dark side of human nature, stuff that's still relevant today, even thousands of years later.
It makes you realize there's always more to the story than meets the eye, right?
Always.
So next time you hear someone throw out that phrase, Sodom and Gomorrah, well, you'll know there's a whole lot more to it.
Oh, yeah. Layers upon layers.
This deep dive may be over, but there are tons of other stories waiting to be unpacked. So until next time, happy digging.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Toby, Eleanor, and our team of researchers are working hard to produce more episodes. If you value what we're doing here, please consider subscribing and sharing the word. Additionally, our podcast, RSS, and Patreon links can be found below. Listener support is what makes our work possible. Join us next time for another deep dive. God bless.